Welcome to my full starting route for Leagues 5. I'm sure at this point you've already seen plenty of different videos telling you the most efficient way to get your first 60 or 70 tasks completed. And realistically, a lot of these videos are going to look very similar because everybody's just doing the same tasks. But one point I do want to make before we start is just like last league, my starting plan largely avoids any of the heavy competition or bottleneck tasks, or at the very least, I will tell you where they're at when they come up. Another thing to mention is at this point we don't know exactly how the relics are going to work or how many tasks it takes to unlock specific regions. If we're just going off last year, we'll start off with our tier 1 skillings, or basically tier 0, because you don't need any points to pick your initial one. This guide itself isn't specifically made for one of the starter relics or the other, so I'll just highlight as we go along which task might be easier or harder depending on which of those starter relics you did pick. But to kick things off, this is roughly what your inventory is going to look like as soon as we spawn. Without really being able to do anything else, you'll get thrown straight into the Leagues tutorial. But at that point, you'll be able to complete both the tutorial and open up your Leagues menu, unlocking your first region of Karamja. And right away, you'll be given 20 points and 2 tasks completed. And then once you get through the tutorial, our next task is to start pickpocketing men. Now you're going to want to keep doing this until you have 28 entire coin pouches, and you can suicide doing this or eat either your shrimp or your bread. But as you continue to work up your 28 pouches, you'll complete all of the following tasks, being pickpocketing a man, achieving your first level up, your first level 5, your first level 10, and then finally you'll get your last task completion whenever you open all 28 coin pouches at once. Now one thing to keep in mind, you do want to keep your eye out for Hans, because there is also another task for us to right click and check our age. And once you've completed that, you'll be rewarded with another task completion. Once you get all 28 of the coin pouches, open those at once to complete that task, and then let's make our way through the castle all the way out the west gate. You can make a pit stop in here and talk to the cook to start Cook's Assistant, although it really isn't that important and that's not something I'm going to be doing. But once you get out the west gate, we want to make our way over here to Fyeth. Talk to her and select option 3, can you sell me something? And with one of the most recent updates, it should open a farming supplies menu and you can buy yourself a rake for 6 GP. Go ahead and rake this tree patch right here to complete that task. Once that's done, you can go ahead and just throw that rake in your tool leprechaun, or you can drop it, but that way you wouldn't have to buy another one later on. And the next task right here is potentially a bottleneck, and that is kicking a spider to death in Lumbridge. And that is very important wording, you do have to actually kick it. You can't punch it with your attack or defensive mode, or shoot it with arrows or magic, it has to be kicking. And you can take a few steps over here west, just a couple extra seconds, and there are a ton of spawns over here right around the Ham hideout. And this is one of those tasks that just feel free to add it if you want, or if it's too much of a problem, just move on and complete it later. But after that, now let's head our way over to the general store. And in here, you want to do a couple things. You'll be selling my bronze sword, my bronze dagger, and the wooden shield. And I'll also be selling my short bow. I'll worry about getting one of those back later. But one interesting thing about the Leagues Lumbee general store is it's actually going to have fishing bait in it. Also, there'll be a couple other unique items that aren't actually in the main game general store. But first, we want to buy ourselves a set of shears and a knife. And then I'll be buying myself as much bait as I can until I have at least 25 GP remaining. And if my math checks out, this should come right around to 29 fishing bait if everything goes to plan. And I do want to make an emphasis right here, this is because I will be going harpoon. Assuming we get to pick the relic right out of the gate with 0 points like we did last league. If you aren't going harpoon, this is probably a step you can skip because it's something you'll probably want to do later. Once you get a lot of the early easy task out of the way, because it's something that's going to take you longer than it will some of the people doing harpoon. Once we've sold all our stuff and got our fishing bait, we're going to make our way out the e-store and over here into the pub. Talk to the bartender. Select option 1, I'll have a beer please. Hand over your 2 cents and get your beer. Now we've got that, we want to make our way north into the sheep pen. Inside here we want to shear at least 4 sheep. And there's also a task to kill a ram, although I believe there's only 3 or 4 spawns inside this actual pen. This is another potential bottleneck task, so if it's way too difficult to complete, just go ahead and skip it and move on. Now the next step before we move on to the cook's assistant part, let's head down just behind Farmer Fred's house, pick one of his onions, and as soon as you get in your inventory, go ahead and eat it to complete a task. Now, if you like, there is a task later on about dyeing a cape orange, and you would need 2 onions to make a yellow dye. If you have the inventory and you so choose, you can start the process of that task now. Personally, I'm just going to wait until I get the teleport tier, or I'll just come back and do it at a later time. But now we're going to make our way up here to the north, and we want to kill one of these goblins. This is another area where there are going to be so many people trying to kill goblins, but there's so many spawns, this one shouldn't be a problem whatsoever. It hasn't been in the past. But kill any of the goblins you can get access to, and you do want to be training on defensive mode. And you want to make sure before you leave this area you have at least 5 defense, because we're going to need it for future tasks. Once you kill that goblin, you can clear out things in your inventory. If you didn't already use some of the runes, just go ahead and drop the body ones. Pick up the goblin's bones and bury them, and that'll complete you 2 tasks of killing a goblin and burying its bones. Then you want to make your way north into the chicken pen. Just like the spider from earlier, this task is very specific, but you need to punch a chicken to death. And once you've got that task completion, we now need to pick ourselves up an egg, and if you cannot get one, there are chicken coops back here in the very back of this pen. Searching any of these is a guaranteed chance of an egg that completely removes any potential bottleneck for that. This is a post-edit note I wanted to throw in here. After you maliciously punch the chicken to death, make sure you pick up the raw chicken. And once we make our way back to Lumbridge to complete Cook's Assistant, cook this on the cook's range to complete a task. Now that we have our egg, make your way over here west into the wheat pen. Take a few steps in, pick yourself a wheat, and then pull up your remote menu and find the cry emote. Do that inside of this wheat pen. That'll complete 2 different tasks. Once you got those both done, let's make our way north into the windmill so we can turn our wheat into flour. Throw it in the hopper, operate the controls. Head down the ladder and collect it, and that should complete another task. Now we want to run north into the cow pen, open the gate, and milk this dairy cow right here. And milking the cow will complete another task, and we were all set with all the ingredients we need for Cook's Assistant. But first, let's run over here all the way to the west into this area just west of the wheat field. And inside this haystack over here, we want to continue searching it until we find a needle. Fortunately, I got very lucky and found that on just the first or second try. But it shouldn't take very many attempts, and that'll be a nice 30-point task completed. Now just a few steps south of here, inside of this potato field, is a tree. Chopping this tree is a task, but this is also one of the heavily bottlenecked tasks that you'll probably want to do later. Now if you are one of the 12 people who are taking the woodcutting relic with tier 1, this is your time to shine, so go ahead and run up here, outpit everybody around, yoink yourself the task completion, and then you can move on. At this point we want to make our way back to Lumbridge, so cast your home teleport spell. And once you arrive, you'll have completed another step of using home teleport. Make your way into the kitchen and talk to the cook to complete Cook's Assistant. Now, a couple side notes, there are a ton of rats that run around in this area of the kitchen and just behind the door. You can kill one of these to complete a task if there are any available. And as soon as you head down this trap door, there are quite a few of the level 1 spiders. You can take one of those out as the Lumbridge task if you didn't get it completed earlier. And use the raw chicken on the cook's stove. And you can use the cooked chicken on the stove once again to burn it to complete another task. Now the next step, we need to make a little bit out of the way running. We want to run all the way to the north side of the castle and use this staircase, because this staircase specifically is another task completed. Before you head all the way up, make your way a few steps south, and we want to turn our 4 pieces of wool into balls of wool. Head back to the north staircase and climb up to the top floor. Make sure you get that task completion before you move on. While you're here, you can bank some of your extra stuff. You can bank the balls of wool, the beer, the tinder box, your extra pieces of food, and just make sure you have one of the combat styles you plan on using, either being range or mage. And then you also want your supplies to do fishing and mining. This step is a little more important if you aren't a harpooner, because you are going to want the extra space. Otherwise, make your way down the staircase and back out the east side of the Lumbridge Castle. Activate your thick skin prayer so it burns your prayer points down to 0, and make your way into the altar area. Pray at the altar to complete a task. Most likely you will need to have 0 prayer points for that task to get completed, so take that into account. Just a couple doors down over here, talk to Bob. Select option 1 to give me a quest. With that, you'll have completed another task, and we're going to make our way into the graveyard. Just like last league, sort through your emotes and find the dance emote and dance in the graveyard. then enter Death's Domain. I'm not 100% positive. You might have to go through a little bit of dialogue in order for him to let you back out. Once you've completed that, head back out the portal, and then you'll have your task completed at that point. And with that, it's time to do some skilling. This is where it alters a little bit depending on which of the relics you did choose with your tier 1s. First up, we want to make our way over here to the copper and tin. Mine one of the copper if you can get access to one, if there isn't too many people trying to harvest all of them at the same time. Just like woodcutting in the potato tree, you will outping people if you are the miner relic. The easy tasks available here are mining 1 copper, mining 5 total tin. If you do have the miner's relic that auto smelts, you also will have completed the smelting 1 bronze bar. Otherwise, if you are a harpooner or a woodcutter, I would attempt to at least get 1 copper and 1 tin so you can do the bronze bar in the future. After that, make your way over here to the fishing spots. Throw your net in the water, and depending on your relic choice, I'd fill the rest of your inventory space up that you made with fish. The first task you'll complete is obviously catching 1 shrimp. As a harpooner, once you get 5 fishing, you'll be able to right-click bait fish with the harpoon in your inventory. There's a 30-point task for catching 25 sardines, along with an additional task for cooking 10 of them. Most likely with the 50% chance of cooking, you'll also complete both of those tasks if you do happen to have enough bait. Once you get 10 fishing, you'll have the ability to catch a herring, which is another 10-point task. And then the last simple one to do here is to net fish once you get 15 fishing to catch 1 anchovy. And it could be a little different this league if a ton of people end up choosing the harpoon route. Last league, there were so many people who were lighting fires right here. So if you don't want to deal with having a full inventory, or if you just want to cook as you go, there is a 10-point task for cooking your first shrimp. And then lastly, there's a task for cooking 5 things successfully in a row. I'm not entirely sure if this is going to be something that is AFK possible with harpooner. You won't have the ability to complete that one now because you won't have any fish in your inventory because they're all getting banked. But for the miners and woodcutters, you also have that task available to complete now if you don't want to save it for later. Now we're going to make our way out here west into the Lumbee Swamp. Try to find yourself one of the lower level frogs, or any frog really that you have access to, and take it out. Killing any of these frogs in Lumbridge will give you a task completion. Then make sure you have your Drayman staff equipped and enter the shed, and you'll complete a task for entering Xanaris. Make your way southwest, and if your inventory happens to be full, go ahead and bank some of your stuff. The one thing you do need right now is shears, and I used this method last league. There are quite a few sheep in this area right here. Make sure you get yourself 20 pieces of wool by shearing these sheep. One change, they are not left-click shears, so you do have to use your shears on each individual sheep, but they work just fine. This was a very low competition way of getting 20 wool ready for sheep shear to complete later. Before we head out, we want to get our inventory all situated. Make sure you have your 4 balls of wool that you made earlier. We'll no longer have our bait because we'll have used it. Withdraw all of the GP you have. There should be an additional 25 GP in your bank that we haven't touched just yet. You can bank or wield those bronze arrows. They're not in your way. You have access to dropping your shears now. You don't need those anytime soon. You can get out your beer, all of your runes, your axe, your knife, a few pieces of food, your tinderbox, and then you can bank or drop your fishing net. And then lastly, you can bank your 1 copper and 10 because you won't be needing those until later. Your inventory should look something roughly like this, or a little bit less runes depending on how you killed some of the NPCs earlier, like the goblin, and getting your defense trained up. Once that's sorted, we're now going to make our way down here to this fairy ring and use code DIS, which will teleport us straight to the Wizard's Tower. Using a fairy ring will give us another task completion, and we're going to make our way north into Drainer Village from here all the way across this long bridge. You can see there's a shooting star here, but you can make your way north and look around to make sure to see if there's any forestry events happening around. There are quite a few of those that are a task completion, but the first thing we want to do is make our way into Ned's house. Talk to him. Select option 2, yes, I would like some rope. After spamming through some dialogue, select option 2, you have the balls of wool, and ask him if he can turn your wool into rope. And once he's done that, you have completed another task. Now we're going to make our way over here into Aggie's house. Make sure you have your at least 20 GP on you in your inventory. Select option 3 to call her a witch. She'll steal your GP, and you have completed another task. You can run over here to the west and trade Fortunato to buy some very cheap, great healing wine. Otherwise, now it's time to run some agility laps. We're going to be running 10 laps of the Draenor Agility course, which will be completing a 5+ different tasks for us. The first one is just going to be completing your very first lap. You'll get a 30-point task for completing all 10 laps. Sometime in the process, you'll achieve your first level 20. And then the last one is sometime along the way, you will hopefully find yourself a Mark of Grace. And if you somehow manage not to get good RNG and you don't get a Mark of Grace inside those 10, just run an additional couple laps until you ultimately do get that task completed. Once you've made it to this point of the guide, you will have somewhere around 40 tasks completed depending on which of the starter relics you did choose. You also should have just over 500 total points, which if the threshold didn't change from last league, realistically it could be lower with them lowering how many points you receive from medium tasks. But even if it didn't change and you unlock tier 2 with 500 points, my assumption is that tier 2 is going to be the teleport relics, where I'm sure it will be quicker to access one of the teleport spots you have available rather than running to where I'm going to be running. Now, if tier 2 isn't the teleport relics or you weren't able to get 500 points out of all those initial tasks, no worries, because at this point we are going to Soul Wars minigame teleport. Make your way out the portal into Edgeville, and we're going to run south into Barbarian Village. Run into this long hall just up here to the north, and that's what your cup of beer is for, because you are going to drink it inside of here. Doing so will complete a task, and now you also have the ability to safe spot one of these barbarians if you do so choose. This is another one of those tasks I'm just going to tell you and do later. But up to this point, if you have done more combat training or you still have some runes left over, that is a task you can easily throw in. But once we've done that, we are now going to head down this entrance, and it's time to complete the Stronghold of Security 10K. Once you've gotten your 10K, you do want to access all the way to the bottom floor and collect the boots, because equipping any pair of those boots is a 30-point task. Now that you're 10K richer, it's time to go on a little buying spree. First, head into this helmet shop. Buy yourself one of these steel full helms, and assuming you did get your 5 defense done earlier, equipping that will give you a task. Make your way north out of Barbarian Village. From here, we're going to be heading straight up all the way right into this general store, because just inside of here to the right, I believe, there is a hat stand, which is a new task in this league. Use your steel full helm on the hat stand, and you should get the message, oops, it fell off the hat stand. Make sure you pick it back up off the ground before you leave, but you will get a task completion for that. Now we're going to make our way down into the Edgeville dungeon. Get yourself a Slayer assignment from Vanica. Unfortunately, it is not a task just to get an assignment in general for this league. But once you do get a task and get a gem, right-click to check it, and that is a task itself. Before you leave, make sure you trade Vanica and buy yourself a spiny helmet. Put that on your head, and that will be a task. And I'm not 100% sure, but you might be able to resell that for some GP back. And this is one area where I think there is going to be quite an insane bottleneck, and that is killing a giant. Killing a giant is the very best way to unlock your very first combat mastery point. One thing I would recommend though is even if there is way too many people down here for you to do that task right now, go ahead and grab yourself a brass key. That way if there's too many people or you just don't have the runes like I probably won't at this point, now you'll have very easy access to get your way back in. Heading out this door, there are quite a few little goblin spawns, all of which have a spear. Killing any of these goblins with a spear is a task completion. Unfortunately, there is only like 4 or 5 spawns for these goblins, so this one might be a little difficult. One shining light though is we are going to be around here for a while because we are going to start training our woodcutting here. Hopefully throughout that process, one of the goblins will spawn right on top of you so you can get an easy task completion there. Otherwise, you can make yourself some inventory space with the food you didn't use from going through the stronghold. And it's time to start chopping away. The first task you're going to complete is chopping your very first tree. Burning one set of logs is an additional task. And then once you chop a second tree, fletching those into arrow shafts is a very easy third task. This is another part of the guide where you can easily change the route depending on your personal preference. You can easily move on after completing those 3, or you can choose to tackle an additional 3 of burning 1 set of oak logs, fletching 1,000 arrow shafts, or fletching 25 oak stalks. Regardless of which path you choose, whenever you get done, it's time to make our way into Varrock. Fortunately for me, he's right here as soon as I get into the entrance, but you want to be on the lookout for the stray dog. Once you find him, you do want to right click and pet him to complete a task. From here, we're going to make our way into Zaf's shop. And I believe the best method now is to buy yourself a Staff of Air rather than buying the Staff of Fire. Now make your way down here over to Aubrey. Once you're in Aubrey shop, we want to buy ourselves like 200 to 300 casts. Make sure you are heavy on the mine runes because we do have a Staff of Air. Just out of pure muscle memory, the first time I opened the shop, I bought quite a few purchases of air runes by mistake. Once you get a few hundred mine runes, you also want to divvy out and buy quite a few cast of some elemental runes as well. 100 or so of each should be plenty. Just south of Aubrey's, there is a mugger spawn that you can take advantage of for completing that task. I imagine this one is going to have a ton of traffic. There tends to be an imp that also spawns pretty commonly around this area. Killing a imp with earth spells is another task we want to complete in the future. That is one of the many reasons why you want to have access to each of the elemental types. Otherwise, make your way over here to the east and steal a cup of tea. Make sure you do not drink this cup of tea and you keep it in your inventory. We'll need it in a few minutes. Use this rock formation to safe spot a guard if they are not all taken. Once we've done that, we're going to move on over here. If there was a bottleneck earlier, make your way down this manhole. And inside here, there are about 20 different spawns for rats. Now that you've killed your rat, just over here to the east, there is a hairdresser. And we want to right-click Emma to get ourselves a haircut to complete a task. This is completely free, so you don't need to worry about having any kind of GP. And after doing that, we're now going to make our way straight north into the church. And this is where our cup of tea is going to come in handy. I'm sure plenty of people did this task last time. Although personally, I had no idea this was even a thing until actually Leagues 4. Up here on the second floor, there is Elsie rocking in her chair. Select option 1 to offer her your cup of tea and she'll tell you a story, thus completing your task. At this point, you should 100% have access to the second tier of relics, which will passively be giving you 8x XP instead of 5x. So now would be a good time to make your way down the staircase and complete the Natural History Museum quiz. Completing that is both a task and will also reward you with a ton of Hunter and Slayer XP. Exactly 8k in each respective skill if you are doing it on the 8x multiplier. From there, you can teleport yourself down to South Varrock or just run here manually depending on what teleport you have access to, if any. Stop in the sword shop, and we want to buy ourselves an iron dagger. Go ahead and equip that to complete a task. And then just a few steps south of here is Charlie the Tramp. Talk to him. Select option 4 to go get a job. And once you've angered the homeless, you will get another task. Make your way over to just the south of this building, but north of the wall, and pick one of these cabbage spawns. And on the home stretch of the last few tasks we're going to be including, head down here into the Dark Wizard area. Killing a wizard is a task, and at this point you have most likely gotten 10 combat, which also is a task. From here, we're going to make our way slightly more south down to the river. And as you can see, there are a ton of ducks just south of the Champions Guild. And unfortunately, I'm currently on the wrong spellbook. Make sure you are using fire spells because the task is killing a duck with fire spells. Otherwise, at this point, this is where I'm going to cut the route off. This route is very easily doable in just over an hour to start Leagues 5. It comes out to around roughly 75 tasks depending on what your relic and bottleneck problems are. And at that stage, you have so many different options you can take. If you were unable to do any of the mining tasks earlier, there are a ton of mines near you. There's one over here to the east and just over here to the west. There are some red berry bushes right here by this yew tree to pick for your red dye to make the orange dye for the cape. There's a list of quite a few very easy to complete tasks over in Karamja I didn't touch on whatsoever. And you almost certainly have completed enough tasks to be able to unlock your first region, and you can just jump over to whatever region you are picking first and just start knocking out some of the easy tasks over there. You also have the wool in your bank from earlier that you sheared from all the sheep, and you can make your way back to Lumbridge and turn those into balls of wool and complete sheep shear for an easy 30 points. This is just a starter route after all. Hopefully you guys enjoyed or found it helpful. If you did, consider dropping a like. I'm happy League Prep is finally turning into actually getting to play the league. We're now only a couple days away, and I hope you guys are ready.